Last night I was sitting on the roof of the apartment here on Lanzarote, just here on the roof, under a billion stars, when I got a call from my daughter in Mexico, which was very lovely to hear from her. But she had some very sad news for me. Somebody we both know very well, for many years and loved dearly, took her own life a couple of mornings ago. And of course the tears flowed, the spontaneous response to loss and grief, part of what makes us human, isn't it? But something else happened as well. Able to talk a little bit about how much we love this young woman, but I noticed that the stars didn't fall out of the sky, and the dogs didn't start barking. I have this thing about the noisy dogs in the village here on Lanzarote. They have three conversations, one in the morning, one at lunchtime, they've just finished their lunchtime chat, and one in the evening. And it used to really get to me, it used to really annoy me, but since I've given them names and I realise that they're just chatting to each other and perhaps passing on the X Factor result or the lottery numbers. Ralph! Jeff, Ralph, have you got the numbers? Ralph, yes. It seems daft, isn't it? But it seems more bearable. In fact, I get quite interested in what they've got to say. So the dog's barking continues even after a precious life is snuffed out, of course even more tragically by her own hand. And it just leaves you bereft, doesn't it? And all of the vain imaginings you had about what life is all about sort of tumbles down like a Jenga stack of bricks at that moment. And yet through the I can't say despair, it wasn't despair, through the distress, something remained the same. It was a sort of a quiet appreciation that all this comes and goes in a still backdrop. And it struck me that the stars weren't passively or disinterestedly looking down or paying no attention. It felt to me like a genuine compassion. It sounds a bit crazy to talk of stars light years away being compassionate, but in a way, if you think about it, the light that arrived on the roof last night, it started off on a star years ago, maybe light years ago, to reach the roof just in time to comfort me in my distress with my daughter. So we're all wrapped up in this together. And then as the tears subsided, I saw a flash of light, a shooting star, go across a slightly cloudy sky, and it seemed the most appropriate thing to happen to mark the passing of this bright spark, this courageous young woman who had battled her own demons of depression for some years, and the family were completely included in it, and of course were profoundly supportive. we can't help but ask the question then, what is a life worth? Not what is a life worth. Every life has its worth, but I suppose it's how do we attribute meaning to any individual life, whatever its achievements or failures, whatever its happiness or sadness, whatever its sanity or madness. And of course it's just a truism to say that each of us has no idea, do we, what it's like being the other person. Even our closest friend or our deepest lover, we might like to think we know them well, but who truly knows what's going on in the mind of another? And in the case of this delightful young woman, I can only guess at what jousting and crazy thoughts were going on for a long while, which she overcame very courageously for the past few years, but it all became too much 2 nights ago. Well, actually two mornings ago. So we're left with this conundrum that we appear to be fundamentally separated from one another, not knowing what is going on in the mind or heart. We call it the heart, don't we? That place where we can be found out. It's one thing knowing stuff in our head, but in situations like this, the profound loss, it sort of shakes you, doesn't it? And what matters? What do you invest your life in? And one of the things, of course, that it does is it makes us all resolve to live life more fully. It's very popular to say, I live in the moment, or have a bucket list of all the things I want to do, or go, as indeed I have done, racing around the world, packing in experiences before we die. This time last year on Bali and Australia. So I'm as up for that as anybody else. But I think the secret of living life to the full, what if you're incapacitated and it's not feasible for you to go to Bali or Brisbane? What's a fulfilling life then? And of course, many people who are incapacitated, I know, I'm thinking of one in particular, live a wonderfully full and expansive life that conducts energy and love to those around them. So it's not about gadding about, it's about coming home to yourself, and what are those values that come tumbling out at times like this. I mentioned this idea of apparent separation. We don't know what the other's thinking or feeling. We can impute, of course we can, but we don't know for sure. But I think there is evidence to suggest that we're not as isolated from each other as it first appears. This me that we take ourselves to be is a slippery customer. It's difficult to pin down. If you go pearl diving for this pearl of the I at the center of your being, good luck with that. See if you can find this I, which seems to me nothing more than a construct of the mind, and our sense of identity seems to be remarkably stable. Our fingernails and everything in our body, I believe, gets renewed every few weeks or months or years, except our eyes. I think our eyes, I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I think our eyes, the cells in our eyes stay the same from birth to death. Is that why babies have such beguiling big eyes? I don't know. So we think of ourselves as a continuity, but in fact, certainly our body is always changing and our experience is always changing. So are we indeed separate selves? If you go self-diving, you let me know, but I don't think you can find this separate self. All that seems to be apparent is a sense of being alive, a sense of being the observer of this apparent self. And this awareness of being alive, of being some sort of being, as you investigate it, it seems to have no weight, no edge, no boundary, no time. It's timeless, weightless, spaceless. It just is. And everything comes and goes in this timeless, weightless space. And it was in that space that I heard this distressing news on the roof last night. And I mourn, of course, with tears, the passing of this bright spark who I knew and loved so well. Our favourite activity together in recent years is playing online Scrabble. We don't live close by, but we did enjoy our online Scrabble. So one spark of life is clearly extinguished in that form. There's a lovely Spanish word I've learned recently for a bright spark or a spark from a bonfire, una chispa. Francis was one of those una chispas, a bright spark, and everybody recognized that in her. And to her credit, in recent years, she recognized that in herself, for sure, and became to my eyes, a very accomplished artist and illustrator like her dad. Gosh, the anguish. So another Chispa is extinguished in the night sky. But you know that is that the end of it? We don't know. For sure, that's the honest answer, isn't it? We don't know. Nobody's come back and given us the chapter and verse on it. I remember when the entertainer Roy Castle was interviewed about his terminal cancer and whether he was afraid of dying. His quick as a flash response was, well, millions of people have done it and there've been no complaints so far. The honest answer is we don't know what happens when we die. If we see ourselves as nothing more than this body, nothing more than our thoughts and emotions, if we see our consciousness as nothing more than an emerging quality of complexity from a brain with 80 billion synapses, however many it is, then of course if you pull the plug on that, there is nothing after death. But when you have a look at what the animating source of our liveliness and our creativity is, when you talk about grief, when you talk about love, when you talk about, yes, even creativity, the inspiration from a billion stars in the night sky, this is more than, well, now I'm going into opinion, and everybody's got one which they want to defend, but this is more than a billion neurons firing. Just as an aside, completely off track now, you might want to check out Manzotti's spread mind theory of consciousness, which locates our consciousness not in our brain, what Woody Allen calls his second favourite organ, but out there in the world of rocks and palm trees, well, here on Lanzarote, palm trees. And our consciousness is, if you like, an interaction, a process, a dance, and we are part of that dance. And the lovely Frances was and is part of that dance, and her physical dance might be over, but honestly, this morning I've been chatting with her on the way down to the cafe for breakfast, partly giving her a hard time, partly asking questions, mostly just missing her. What a bright spark has gone from our everyday life. Bless you.